All right, guys, check, check, check. There might be some static. This mic is, my friend's leaving right now. Anyway, check, check, check. I'm working on this video. So, this is what they're teaching me in my 2 year university class, microeconomics. Microeconomics has to do more with how firms operate. As opposed to macro, it's more of how the government creates economic policy. Yeah, unfortunately, they are, always tugging and adding more things that allows them to have a little more control over the economy and the free market. So this is my economics course at my 2 year university in microeconomics. This actual chapter, this lecture is called Issues in Labor Markets. So income and wealth has grown significantly for those at the top in the US, but only slightly for the bottom. And real wages remaining roughly at the same for the past 50 years. That's so an explanation for the fact that income and wealth has grown significantly for the top two quintiles. The top two quintiles being they make up a vast amount of our economy. I should have printed out that other shit too. I forgot. I would have gave you guys some numbers. Like there's approximately 100 and something trillion dollars out there in the American economy, and the vast majority is owned by a small amount of people. And so, issues in the labor markets. Remember, income and wealth has grown significantly for the top people in the United States, but slightly for the bottom Americans. That's what I'm worried about. And real wages, there's nominal wages. Yes, minimum wage used to be $1 in the 1920s. Now it's what? Let's just say, hypothetically, it's $20 now, minimum wage. That's that's a change in the name of something. Nominal, the change in the number. Yeah, well, yes. If you look at it, yes, it has changed from $1 to $20. That's the nominal wage. But the real wage is how much does that $1 make compared to that $20? That $20 just as valuable as that $1 was back in the early 20th century. That's what it means by the real wages remaining roughly at the same for the past 50 years. So why have real wages been flat? Why have they been flat? Well, some ideas that workers are more productive, the value they produce for employers has increased, but the wages have not kept pace. So you're like, they're more productive, they're more valuable for their employer, but how come the wages have not kept pace? Remember the real wages, the inflate, the how much that $20 is actually worth and how much it can actually get in trading that for something, how much compared to that dollar back in the 1920s. Except for the last 50 years, the real wages have not really changed. For the last 50 years, are corporations more greedy and evil than they just are? Are they any more greedy and evil than they have been? Or are there just more greedy people now? So my professor doesn't think so. He says no, but labor competition has made it easier for these firms. Firms are the companies, the people with businesses and who create jobs, the producers. Labor competition makes it easier for firms to keep the wages down or stagnant. So another section is called competition, social, and population changes. We've learned of the benefits of competition. An example is perfect competition benefits the economy and society as a whole. Remember, you don't really profit off of perfect competition, but it benefits the economy and society as a whole. But the firms in a perfectly competitive market structure, they don't like it. They want to make a profit. All firms want to be monopolies if they could. Labor competition has benefits to society and the economy, but workers facing competition don't like it, obviously. So there are two major reasons for the increase in labor competition: declining unionization, rising globalization. So globalization are national economies coming together and forming one global economy. That's what it means. So labor markets, we're focusing on unions. So a labor union is an organization of workers that negotiates the terms of employment with employers. So a labor union is an organization, pretty much of representatives. A labor union is a representative organization of multiple workers that negotiate the terms of employment with employers. Bargaining, they bargain for the wage, sick time insurance, paid, vacation. So that's the power of a union. It's an organization of workers that negotiate the terms of employment with employers. Rather than each worker individually negotiating, unions practice collective bargaining, where all workers are represented by the union in negotiations for wages, working conditions, time off, etc. So one of the key powers of a union is a collective bargaining. And it's funny, I'm a sport. I grew up a sports guy. I don't care that much about sports anymore. I rather play sports than focus, like watch. I didn't realize I was watching the politics of sports as a kid. I was just a fan of, oh, so and so's gonna win. Oh, I didn't realize it. How much time I wasted. But you hear about this in basketball. Oh, they're in a collective bargaining agreement. That's just the players' union are in a meeting with the owners of these for profit private companies, which each team is sort of a private company within itself. Los Angeles Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks, they're a for-profit company, so they're a private company. So these players, they're part of a union, but they sign to a contract, and they work for this private company. But whenever they want to negotiate, they go through the union and they have a collective bargaining. So a labor union is an organization of workers that negotiates the terms of employment with employers. Rather than each worker individually negotiating, unions practice collective bargaining, where all workers are represented by the union in negotiations for wages, working conditions, time off, etc. So imagine you're part of a union, you work for a job, and you're in trouble. You say, I need to call my union rep. You want me to go in the office and talk to the boss? No, no, speak to my rep, or I need my rep here to represent me. A lot of people don't like that shit, especially employers. They don't like to hire union people. It's not easy to get rid of them. Just sort of a lot of it has to do with that labor competition. Look at how that mentality has came into the ethos of an American labor structure. And so, labor markets, unions, the rise in labor union membership in the half, okay, the rise in labor union membership in the first half of the 20th century. So the rise in labor unions, so the amount of members of a labor union in the first half of the 20th century, so that between 1900 and 1950, is correlated, has a relation with the drop of inequality, right? And the decline of union membership beginning after 1950, the last half of the 20th century, is correlated with an increase of inequality. Okay? Back then, so in the 1950s, over 30% of the American workers were unionized. Today, it's only 10%. The little thing right here. So, like the National Education Association is probably the biggest labor union still in existence. And what's interesting, they work for you and me, taxpayers. The National Education Association, they're unionized, but they work for the public sector. We're going to talk about the public sector. Then you got the Service Employees International Union. They have to do the healthcare, janitor, security, hotel, other service workers. Obviously, the National Education Association, the NEA, has 3 million members, public school teachers and staff. Then you got the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, 1.5 million state, county, and municipal government workers. International Brotherhood of Teamsters. They're number 4. Everybody knows a lot about the Teamsters. Um, we had Jimmy Hoffa, so they're very infamous. So the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, 1.4 million. Truck drivers, warehouse workers, miscellaneous trades, just to name a few. Yeah, so all right, so then you have unionized workers. I already know that. Blah, blah. So less than 15. Okay, so this is interesting. It's hard to understand. Less than 15% of U.S. workers are public employees, meaning less than 15% of U.S. workers are public employees, meaning the majority of U.S. workers work in the private sector. So less than 15% of U.S. workers work for the public sector. Yet there are roughly equal number of unionized public workers as there are unionized private sector workers. Meaning there's not private doesn't fuck with the union. That's pretty much what this says. Think back to the collective bargaining. What are the goals and interests on each side of the negotiating table? How is it different in the private sector versus the public sector? So, look at this shit. All right, boom. So you got labor markets and unions, the private sector. So it breaks down right here. Look, you got the employer, the employee, in the private sector. So the employer, their main goal for the employer in the private sector, think about it. So the cost and benefits for the employer in the private sector. Obviously, the cost, they have to pay the workers, they have to pay the taxes and the insurance and pay for the training. But the benefits they get is the revenue, the revenue they bring in from their workers, from the worker output. Now, this is the labor market, the unions for the private sector. So the employer has to pay the workers taxes, insurance, training. This is in the private union sector. We're not worried about the non-unionized private world. We know what that you do the work for a paid amount of sum, blah blah. You know, I pay you, blah blah. I can fire you whenever I want. You have no representation besides yourself. Maybe hire a lawyer. Maybe do that. But so the private sector unions, the employer pays the worker taxes, insurance, but the benefit they get is the revenue generated from worker output. Remember, this is private, so they're a for-profit company. So for the employee, the worker, the cost is their opportunity cost. They can maybe be doing something else that's more valuable, but instead they're right there working at that particular place. They could be doing something else, right? That's an opportunity cost. What you lose for being somewhere else at that moment when you could have been somewhere else. Transportation, risk of injury. And it's funny right here in the private sector unions and all sort of any sort of business, it says right here the cost for the employee is stress. I find that kind of silly because I feel like the bosses take on most of the stress. Anybody who's part of a team or a company that or has a sort of position where it's based off of performance, there's stress there all the time. But if you want to weigh it out, I think the employer or the owner of any sort of business, especially a for-profit private company, they take on a lot more stress than just the employee. It's kind of like called babysitting grown men, sort of like being a boss at a company is kind of like babysitting grown men and women. So the cost of private sector union employee, opportunity cost, transportation, stress, risk of injury, benefits, they get wages, chances of advancement in their career, they gain skills and experience, and also fulfillment. But the ultimate goal for an employer in the private sector is to maximize profits. That's in any, even union, non-union. The goal of someone running a business is to maximize profits. And for the employee, it's to maximize utility. To maximize utility. Be there to get paid, be there to learn, advance, pay the rent, live. So both sides have a clear economic goal. So both sides have clear economic goals, making negotiations straightforward business transactions. So both sides have clear economic goals, making negotiations straightforward business transactions. Collective bargaining allows for workers to increase their negotiating power. They have a union. All like you want to work here, no, you have to be part of this union. We're a team, man. If something's unfair, we all work together. We'll go on strike. We'll affect this man's pockets, this man or woman's pockets immediately. They're the ones bearing the cost. If their business slows down, there's nobody else bearing that cost but that employer. So there's power if we go on strike. It's oh fuck, it makes a difference. Have to get workers quick, quick, quick. That's why the union sort of that's why the unions are going to go away. I can't see them remaining, honestly, unless it's like a relationship. That company's been around forever. Like, no, dude. When I first started this company, I shook my hands with the labor union president 100 years ago, and I can't betray them now, or whatever. So, in this private sector union, where the employer's goal is to maximize its profits, a collective bargaining the labor union's collective bargaining power still exists. But let's go to a labor market union in the public sector. Remember, less than 15% of US workers are public employees. So most US workers work in the private sector. That's almost nearly 90% of US workers work in the private sector. So unions are dying. Yet there are roughly equal number of unionized public workers as there are unionized private sector workers. Meaning there's hardly any private sector union workers, but yet there's like 90% people work in the private sector. So let's see this. So labor market unions in the public sector. Labor market unions in the public sector. So what are the goals for the employer in this public sector? There are a different set of costs and benefits and goals for an employer in the public sector, and you're going to find out why. The employer here is an administrator of a public institution. The employer is an administrator of a public institution. Profit is not the goal. Taxpayers, not the employer, pay the costs. They're spending your money. These labor union markets in the public sector are spending your money. Who pays your professor at these junior colleges? You're paying this professor. Public, not employers, gain the benefits. Remember, right? You pay for the professor, you get the benefits, right? What's funny to me is like, but then they have these private kind of schools or these. But why are you making us pay for school if our taxpayers pay these professors, et cetera, right? And what about the employee? What about the worker in the public sector? He still wants to maximize his utility. He wants to grow in the company. He wants to learn skills. He wants to pay his rent. He wants to work for his family. He wants to have a livelihood, right? But remember here, only one side has straightforward economic goals, complicating the nature of negotiations. Employers are not true representatives of owners, creating a moral hazard. Public institutions typically have monopoly powers, meaning they have no competitive pressures. They have guaranteed revenues because they're using your tax money and are not the ultimate bearers of cost. Remember, you are the bearer of the cost. A strike by public employees does not primarily harm their employers, but the public. Like these teachers at these public schools, when they go on strike, they're only on strike for like a couple days. Who are they striking against? Remember, there's no competition. There are monopolies. There's no competition to drive up wages. There's nothing, none of that. So they're not incentivized. They're not. No one wants to do those jobs. The wages are low. So it's like I don't know. I don't. We're paying them, right? We're there's some. Obviously, this is an overview. I don't really know too much. I haven't studied it that much, but if they go on strike, they'll just be replaced, probably easily replaced. We'll get a substitute. Someone will take that job. But I don't know. But I don't know. But then it is sort of you have to go to school. It takes a lot of time. You can't just you can't wake up tomorrow and say I'm gonna be a teacher. You need qualifications. But it just doesn't seem like the cost isn't that immediate, right? If they go on strike, the cost isn't that immediate because these are public sector organizations. This is not. It's a strike. A strike by public employees does not primarily harm their employers, but it harms the public. So if no teachers, if all teachers went on strike, it would harm the kids, and so it would harm our young people. And that's kind of sad, right? It's just kind of like. So let's go. Let's go here. All right. So labor market unions, by negotiating guaranteed wages, by these labor unions negotiating guaranteed wages, benefits, and hours, the unions reduce competition for their workers. Union contracts often require closed shops, meaning only union members can work, and membership is controlled by the union. So let's break it down. A major factor in the rise of inequality in the U.S. over past 60 years is the stagnant wage growth. That same real wage, that same $1, that looks like $20 an hour now, gets you the same shit as it did 60 years ago. For most workers, which can be explained by increased labor competition, and among which two causes are the decline in unionization, representation for the worker, and the rise of globalization. The rise of globalization. I hate doing these bureaucratic hand fucking Gavin Newsom shit, but so increased labor competition means more people. A decline in unionization means could be wages going up with cost of living, adjusted to cost of living. So labor markets, down to the bread and butter, immigration. Globalization is the integration of national economies into a global economy. It has many benefits and costs. Some people get more benefits, others pay more costs. So one aspect of globalization is obviously the influx of people migrating to that particular market. So the general agreement among economists on the overall economic benefit of immigration. So what does immigration do for a particular market, a particular economy? More people, more workers, more people to consume, more entrepreneurs running businesses. So it increases that country's growth domestic product, how much that location produces, the sum of all production. So the growth in GDP, that's what immigration does. It grows GDP. It grows gross domestic product. Everything that's counted on final output. Final output meaning I go to the store and I buy shoes. They count that as the GDP, gross domestic product. Everything that's consumed, every final product that's consumed. The increase in tax revenues. Doesn't matter if you're illegal or legal. You pay for something, you have sales. Everybody has equal amount of sales tax. When it comes to income tax, it's on a it's on obviously it's progressive. We have a progressive tax. But the cost of immigration is concentrated in specific segments of the economy. And that's for the lower paid jobs. So the cost of immigration is the decline in wages for lower paid jobs due to the increased competition. So jobs that don't take a a, a, a a job I could wake up tomorrow, walk into a store, hey, you need someone to run this cashier? That that quick training, like doesn't take a lot of training, a lot of expertise, or a lot of um, qualifications. So the lower paid jobs, those wages are not moving at all, and it's obvious, it's common sense because so there's like 1,000 people waiting, just they'll take your job, like we don't need you. The labor, it's not really competitive. It's almost sort of superfluous. There's someone waiting. Like we don't, dude. We're not incentivized. You're replaceable. We don't need to raise these wages. What do you mean you want to break? What do you mean you don't want to work these? Somebody's obviously there's their lifestyles. There's people coming from a different place that different values and different ideas, different incentives. It's very common sense. It's very so the cost of immigration is decline in wages for lower paid jobs. So the people with in lower paid jobs, that's just never going to go up. For the past 60 years, they have not seen an increase in real wages. That same $25 an hour will get you the same thing that $5 got you 60 years ago. So that's pretty it. That's pretty self-explanatory right there. It's globalization, the increase in labor competition, and the decline in unionization, the decline of representation for the workers as a collective, to have a collective bargaining agreement that we're going to represent each other when we go and talk to these employers, and also the fact that most unions are in the public sector, meaning it's us paying these, it's our taxes are paying these people. So when they did, there's no bargaining power at all. There's no collective bargaining power at all because these are not for-profit companies. That's the idea of bureaucrats spending your money. They're wasting your fucking money, man. So that's why. So why is there more inequality? Stagnant wages. Why stagnant wages? More labor competition. Why more labor competition? Globalization, less unionization. Immigration fills into globalization. It's national economies integrated into one big global economy. That's when they say globalists. You know what globalists do? They go invest in these growing countries. They literally go and invest in these growing countries, and they just suck up all the resources, man. They suck up all the resources, and so they're very powerful. They're very powerful. Very. Anyway, peace.